Question number 12, Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance. Does he stand by his statement that, quote, returning to surplus and repaying debt are among the most important things the government can do to ensure New Zealand can withstand future shocks and build a more competitive economy based on exports and new jobs, close quotes? If so, will there be a surplus for the 2014-15 year?
Mr. Speaker, in answer to his questions, yes, I do stand by my statement, and no, there will not be a surplus for that year. But I want to thank our public servants for their role in the very substantial process the government has made on getting back to surplus. They have worked hard to provide more for less, and despite the fact that in many public services there's been no new money, public trust in public services is higher than it has ever been, certainly higher than the period where the previous Labor government was pouring cash into every service.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
In light of that answer, why did he make the promise to New Zealanders in September last year that number one of his 5 fiscal priorities for the next 3 years was, I quote, return to surplus this year and maintain surpluses over the next 3 years?
Honourable
Speaker,
Bill English.
because it still is our very high priority to get back to surplus. And the analogy I used the other day was if you set out to lose 10 kilos and you lose 9.9 kilos, you're almost there, and we're almost there with the surplus.
Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
In light of that answer from the Minister, if he was trying to lose 10 kilos to fit into a suit for his brother's wedding and he only lost 9.8 kilos, he still doesn't fit into the suit, and isn't that a failure?
Honourable Bill English.
Well,
Order.
Mr. Speaker, it was my niece's wedding, and the suit was a bit tight, but I wish I'd borrowed the members.
Supplementary question, Mr.
Supplementary
Speaker.
question, Grant Robertson.
In light of that answer, and with someone with some knowledge of weight loss in recent times, can the Minister finally admit that he has failed to meet the promise he made to New Zealanders at the last election to get into surplus this year, and will he finally ditch the excuses and front up?
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, there's no excuses. I mean, before Christmas, the government published the updated forecast that showed a deficit. The member might have only just figured that out, but that was actually 6 months ago. So in 14-15 we will not quite get to surplus. In 15-16 and the following years, the member will just have to wait for the budget. But we're on track, and actually I have a much easier life than that member who gets up in the House every day saying the surpluses should be bigger when all his caucus are saying we should spend more money.
Supplementary question, David Seymour.
Can the Minister confirm Treasury reports that this government will be in surplus every year from the mid-20s for decades? And is that a greater priority than making surplus this year? And if so, what is the government doing about it?
Honourable Bill English, any one of those three supplementaries.
Mr. Speaker, I admire the way the member makes us all look very short-termist here, but we are focusing on a surplus now. But the member is quite correct to have understood that the government is making decisions, particularly around the way it's approaching long-term welfare dependency, which will be having an impact on surpluses in the 2020s. For instance, the number of sole parents under 20 has dropped by 40% in 3 years. New Zealand will be making savings because of that intervention for the next 20 or 30 years.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
Can the Minister guarantee a surplus for the 2015-16 year?
Honourable
Well, Mr. Speaker, the member will just have to wait for the budget. But I can anticipate that in the budget, whatever the operating balance is, the government will be pointing out that these numbers move around according to economic conditions. What is under our control is government expenditure, and that is certainly on track.
We move now to questions to members. Question number 1 in the name of the Honourable